So let's talk monastic robed space marines, Deathwing Terminators, and frantically covering up heresy, with a guide to starting Dark Angels in 9th edition 40k. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Unforgiven, and we're going to do a focused look on starting a Dark Angels army and the various options that you have open to you. We'll talk about why you might want to collect them, planning an army, perhaps some ideas for first purchases, a couple of different ways that you might expand from there, then 2 examples of competitive Dark Angels lists. Plenty to talk about, so let's jump straight in. So first up, why might you want to collect Dark Angels in the first place? All the Space Marine chapters have their own interesting twists and selling points, and Dark Angels kind of epitomise the shadowy knightly order of monks, perhaps in particular epitomising Space Marines as the warrior knight type role. Much of their chapter's identity is built around the fall of the Dark Angels of Caliban. When the Lion returns to his homeworld following the Horus heresy, he was rather surprised to find that Luther and the Dark Angels that stayed at home were now worshipping chaos, and since then much of their chapter's identity has been the hunt for the fallen, and to bring their treacherous brothers to a state of repentance. In-game they tend to be a largely codex chapter with a fair few special characters and options, perhaps most notably their uniquely powerful Deathwing Terminator formations and Ravenwing Biker and Landspeeder companies. The black-clad Ravenwing find the fallen, and then the Deathwing bring down the hammer to bring them to justice. Model-wise, the Space Marine range is the biggest out of any of the armies of 40k, quite a lot of old relics in there, but all the new shiny Primaris things that have come out over the past few years too. Dark Angels, I'd say, are pretty well supported in terms of unique models for their faction, though at the moment the vast majority of those are firstborn models, a couple of squads of Deathwing Terminators, and really quite a lot of unique extensive models for the Ravenwing, things like Dark Talons, Black Knights, and Landspeeders. There's not a whole load for Dark Angels on the Primaris side of things yet, aside from one character and an upgrade sprue. I'm sure at some stage they'll get a bigger robed Space Marine release, kind of similar to the Black Templars. Still though, certainly a decent amount of options available. On the board, the Dark Angels can play in very different ways depending on whether you field the Ravenwing, Deathwing, or the bulk of their green armoured forces. The Ravenwing tend to be very fast, hit hard, and a little bit harder to kill than normal bikes. The Deathwing will mightily trudge up the field, laughing off the vast majority of enemy fire before destroying them in combat, and the more tactical other elements of the army tend to prefer gunline tactics more than assault, getting nice bonuses to hit when they stand still. Currently in game, I'd rank them as kind of medium strength overall within 40k, though certainly one of the stronger Space Marine chapters out of their selections. Almost every section of their codex is decently strong compared with the other Space Marine chapters. They've got very strong Terminators, nice psychic powers, a bunch of quite useful special characters, and plenty more besides. Finally, as 40k armies go, Space Marine armies do generally tend to be cheaper. Space Marines do have a decent amount of discounts going on, and Dark Angels forces in particular can be very elite if you want to, meaning that you don't really need all that many kits to make a functioning army. It's usually kind of hard to go too far wrong when Space Marines are concerned in 40k. Games Workshop is known to support them particularly well. Moving on to planning an army, there's a whole load of different resources that you can access to get more information on the Dark Angels and Space Marines in general. From Games Workshop, there's Codex Space Marines and Codex Dark Angels, both of which have their current rules for how the models are fielded, though you can also get them from places like Battlescribe, Warpedia, or the Warhammer app. Some combination of that lot's usually pretty handy for throwing around some lists. If you're trying stuff out, you could think about Tabletop Simulator, and if you want more inspiration either for rules or for just general discussion with current collectors, you could think about social media for Facebook groups, Discord servers, or subreddits. I think there's a few dedicated Dark Angels ones, but Space Marine stuff in general is pretty handy. Otherwise, here on YouTube, you only have to search Dark Angels to find plenty of battle reports, unit reviews, painting guides and things. I did make an overview for Dark Angels in 9th edition video, I'll link that down in the video description. Otherwise, the first things that I'd think about is how to get a small force together, maybe 500 points or 25 power. Most likely either with an HQ and some troops or elites, or one of the Space Marine combat patrol boxes can be a pretty reasonable way to start. There's definitely nothing wrong with starting with any units that particularly inspire you or have drawn you to the faction though. If you want a phalanx of Redemptor Dreadnoughts with macroplasmas, then why not? Or if you know you want to have a decent contingent of elite Ravenwing Black Knights. Probably the biggest thing to try and work out fairly early is what sort of flavour Dark Angels list are you going to try and go down. Are you going to make a bit more of a balanced force with different elements from all 3 of the wings? Or are you going to build to one of the Dark Angels special detachments and try and fill things that are pure Ravenwing or pure Deathwing? to represent a force of first or second company on the board, both of which are pretty viable options. Currently in game, Deathwing is probably the strongest, though I'd still say that the rest of the forces are pretty viable compared with the other Space Marine chapters. They just don't have the crazy toughness of the Deathwing. Perhaps the other major decision is whether to go mainly Primaris or mainly Firstborn. You can definitely mix and match as you feel. It's in a bit of an awkward spot where all the new releases for Space Marines are going to be Primaris. They probably are the future at some point, and the Firstborn kits might not be supported indefinitely. But at the same time, currently all of the cool flavorful kits are Firstborn ones, whether it's these robed Space Marines here on the right, or all the specialist Ravenwing and Deathwing units that aren't just standard units with a different coat of paint applied. In general though, if you are wanting to field a large force of either Ravenwing or Deathwing, you're probably going to need at least some Firstborn units. The Deathwing currently only have the Blade Guard, and the Ravenwing would be the Outriders and Storm Speeders on the Primaris side. In any case, once you have a rough idea of what you're going for, I'd be tempted to paint up a practice model or two for whichever wing you fancy playing first. Maybe some basic green Space Marine Intercessors, or these Dark Angels veterans with the hoods here, or perhaps a Deathwing Terminator or a standard Ravenwing bike. Get a colour scheme established before moving on to bigger squads or fancier character challenges. Then when it comes to actually getting some models on the table in earnest, there's a fair few different ways that you could think about starting. Just in general, when buying 40k miniatures, I would be well aware of the other different sources besides direct from Games Workshop that you can pick up models for. Generally, Space Marines have very good second-hand markets on places like eBay, forums or local Facebook groups, and if you want to get a lot of models for the cheapest price possible, that's probably going to be one of the best ways if you're happy with a little bit of repainting. Otherwise, if you do want new kits, then you could think about discount retailers. Most countries tend to have stockists that take Games Workshop's products and sell them for a little bit less. Here in the UK, one example is Element Games, which I'll link in the video description. Usually a very good saving over buying direct from Games Workshop themselves, and if you do buy anything after clicking that link down in the video description, a small amount goes to help support Auspex Tactics at no cost to you whatsoever. If you were thinking about picking up some 40k models in the UK, they've always been pretty reliable for me. There are plenty of other alternatives though, as a quick Google search will tell you. Otherwise, the main two things that you need to get going are the game rules and some models. Currently, the Space Marine rules are a little bit annoying to access, seeing as they have both the main Codex Space Marines and also Codex Dark Angels for all the interesting and unique stuff for the army. If you had to pick one of the two as an initial purchase, it'd be Codex Space Marines, as the Dark Angels book doesn't really function all that well without the Space Marine one, as you would be missing the vast majority of options and a lot of the core important things like stratagems and troops. The Dark Angels book more has things like supplemental rules, their unique warlord traits, relics, the rules for their unique units like the Deathwing Terminators and their special characters, and a bunch of other things like psychic powers and stratagems and stuff. Perhaps the most annoying thing is knowing that there'll be a new Space Marine Codex sometime later in 2022. It's not officially announced from Games Workshop yet, but it's heavily rumoured from a number of sources. It does mean that if you buy it now, it might well be invalidated in the not too distant future, which can certainly be a bit annoying. I think my personal strategy would be to pick up the Space Marine Codex in the meantime, but if there's any leaks showing that it's just around the corner, I'd probably resell the book promptly, and hopefully recoup a little bit of money before the rules turn into waste paper. I suspect that they probably won't be redoing the Dark Angels supplement imminently. Hopefully that shouldn't go out of date as quickly. Still though, it is a pretty annoying downside of a Space Marine army that you need 2 books rather than 1. Then getting into models, perhaps one of the most logical places to begin would be Combat Patrol Dark Angels. Games Workshop has a lot of different discount bundles. This one's a Primaris one with a Dark Angels upgrade sprue in it, and it gets you a Primaris Chaplain, 5 Intercessors, 3 Inceptors and a Redemptor Dreadnought, and this one would cost £90, $150 or €120. Compared with buying the kit separately, you save around about 20% or so. Maybe not the hugest discount in the world, but pretty much all of these units are quite handy for Dark Angels, I think. Particularly the Interceptors and the Redemptor are just generally strong units. A Foot Chaplain doesn't hurt, and even the Inceptors, which are a little bit more niche for most chapters, could be more tempting for Dark Angels. You could give them the Plasma and use Weapons of the Dark Age for some massive damage. It's really not bad, and the Dark Angel sprue is a nice extra with some sculpted shoulder pads and a couple of extra details. It maybe depends whether or not you actually want to go the Primaris route for the army, or whether you want to focus more on Terminators and bikes. Otherwise, you could maybe think about the Elite Edition starter set for Warhammer 40k in general. It does come with some Necrons that you could potentially swap or keep. That'll get you a Captain, or Master as they're known to the Dark Angels, a bunch of assault intercessors, and a unit of outriders, maybe the outriders just being a little bit more interesting as they can be fielded as Ravenwing. They have the option to be objective secured in one of their detachments with a 5+ invul save, so they're probably one of the strongest ways that you can run that particular unit. Otherwise, Space Marines really are spoilt for choice between their other combat patrol boxes, so plenty of other options if you want to field some Primaris at a discount. There's 3 that are themed around the different chapters, and the standard one which is mainly Phobos Marines, though to be honest they all do give some decent savings on the models within. The standard Space Marine one has Infiltrators and Eliminators, both of which are solid units right now. The Death Watch one I'm maybe a little bit less impressed with, mainly because a lot of value is tied up in the 2 characters, the Primaris Apothecary and the Lieutenant, and I'm generally of the opinion that the Lieutenant could just be kit bashed from a standard Intercessor if you want to. The Space Wolves one goes heavy on 10 Intercessors, an Invicta Warsuit, and 5 Reavers, perhaps the main downside of that one being that the character is very Space Wolf sculpted, so he perhaps doesn't really transfer from different armies all that well. Finally, I do quite like the Blood Angels one. It's got a fairly nice mix of units. Intercessors and the Infiltrator and Cursor kit are generally handy. The Dark Angel's psychic powers are really solid, so having an on-foot librarian certainly isn't bad. Perhaps the Aggressors and the Impulsor aren't super strong right now, but don't really hurt to make up the numbers. Generally, after you've established a small core of units, you can think about expanding in any one of the different directions. Perhaps some of the most interesting things that I think about picking up at the moment would be to have a Librarian or Ezekiel in the battle line. The Dark Angel's Interromancy powers are great and can do sneaky shenanigans such as fights last, reroll all hits in combat, or cancelling Obsec. Really powerful stuff, and can certainly help you get the upper hand with Deathwing Terminators or something. Speaking of which, Deathwing Terminators are very tempting right now, particularly post Armour of Contempt. They've got very good saves, and Inner Circle allows them to be only wounded on a 4+, so they're just ridiculously hard to shift for most things besides stuff like mortal wounds. And I feel in just about any army it's usually going to add a fair bit of strength to it to have a solid anvil of Terminators to bully their way onto a midfield objective. I'd say pretty much every flavour of Terminators is very viable with the Dark Angels, anything from Assault Terminators to Deathwing Knights, though probably my single favourite unit for them are the Relic Terminators, the Cataphractile Tartarus box. I really quite like the way that you can choose to equip them with Lightning Claws or Chain Fists right now, plus you aren't paying for Storm Shields which don't have as much value post Armour of Contempt. Another one I'd think about picking up is the Ravenwing Command Squad. Perhaps the main reason I'd be most tempted to get that is to access the Ravenwing Apothecary. He's exactly what you want in a Chief Apothecary really. He is very fast so can get his healing to where it needs to be, gives you some feel no pain and restoring wounds to valuable models, and for a command point or the Selfless Healer upgrade, you can resurrect a powerful model each turn. He's almost auto-include a status in Strong Dark Angels list, whether he's restoring a Ravenwing Biker or a Deathwing Terminator to the line each turn, he's usually going to be a very good investment. Otherwise, you could think about adding a bit of Ravenwing. The standard Bite squads are really nice in their Ravenwing special detachment for objectives secured on the move, and they are a little bit tougher with their 5+ invul save from Jink when they're scooting around. I'd say perhaps the Ravenwing attack bikes are one of the best fire support choices for Dark Angels. Load them up with multi-melters, and you've got a very fast and hard-hitting unit. Plus it's quite nice the way that they can get Ravenwing shenanigans on the go, like pre-game moving, and delivering a massive alpha strike to tanks. There's plenty of other unique units or special characters that they can do as well. There's Interrogator Chaplains or Azrael, both of which are nice force multipliers. The faster and heavier hitting Ravenwing support options like the Landspeed of Vengeance or maybe the Dark Talon. And of course just about anything that's generically strong for its cost in the Space Marine Codex. Redemptor Dreadnoughts and Eradicators give very decent firepower. To hold the line, the Intercessors and the Phobos troops work pretty well. Having a unit or two of Incursors or Infiltrators can be quite good to hold down the midfield, and Dark Angels can get on particularly well with big squads of plasma weapons if you did want to run a 5-man unit of Inceptors with the plasma. Weapons of the Dark Age can make them into a pretty much anti-everything threat with their big damage 3 guns, so they can certainly be another very solid option. When you're designing a 2000 point list, you could think about building towards one of the special detachments, either a Deathwing Vanguard or a Ravenwing Outrider. These ones give you a few advantages, such as refunding the command point if your Warlord's part of it, and also giving you OBSEC either on Terminators or bikes. If you are going heavy on a first or second company list, then it will be pretty reasonable to build yourself around one of these. I'd bear in mind that the Deathwing one can have anything with the Inner Circle keyword in it, and that includes the vast majority of characters, whether or not they're in Terminator armor. Finally, just to round up, I thought we'd take a very quick look at a couple of competitive Dark Angels lists. The first one mainly Deathwing, and then the second one a bit more mixed. This one was run by John Damaris to take it to first at a big tournament called War in the Berg recently, and basically shows that a pure Deathwing Terminator phalanx can be very intimidating indeed. This one being a real first company list with 40 Deathwing Terminators supported by 3 characters. For the Terminators, there's 2 big blocks of Deathwing Knights, the ones that hit on 2s with damage 3 Thunderhammer profiles, and have a pretty reasonable chance of just killing anything that they get their hands on. They're then backed up by 2 big squads of Relic Terminators with Combi Bolters and Lightning Claws. They're obscenely hard to shift for the cost with Armour of Contempt, and they also have objectives secured in this Deathwing Vanguard detachment. Leading them into battle, there's an Interrogator Chaplain with a Teeth of Terror and a Jump Pack. Dark Angels get access to the Interrogator one that's got a few more options, including a Chainsword, and he has a slightly boosted stat line compared with the standard one. He takes the Litany of Faith for some feel no pain against mortal wounds, which is perhaps the Terminator's biggest weakness, and also the Canticle of Hate for some boosted charges. He'll be casting both of those litanies on a 2+ with Master of Sanctity and Wise Orator. Then there's a Librarian with a Force Sword and Jump Pack. He takes Mind Worm, Righteous Repugnance, and Engulfing Fear, so fights last, reroll all hits in melee and all wounds, and the one that can strip Obsec. He's a Chief Librarian with Psychic Mastery for +1 to cast, and also Decisive Tactician for a charge and advance buff. Finally, there's that great Ravenwing Apothecary. As well as providing that excellent healing and setting up a model for a command point each turn, he also has the Reliquary of the Repentant to reduce enemy invul saves, and Rites of War to give objectives secured to the units that don't have it. It means that those Deathwing Knights will likely be securing objectives just as well as being an enormous pain to take down. Overall, the list will certainly be pretty slow when it's on the board, but still be able to laugh off the vast majority of enemy firepower, and you're going to need some serious melee power to scrape it off the midfield objectives, with just how many Terminator bodies there are and how hard they hit in combat. For another example that's just a little bit less Deathwing focused, here's an older tournament list, this one run by Tom Ogden, who used it to take first at Victorian Showdown. I'll admit that this list probably doesn't work all that well competitively in its current form, the main reason being that there's a couple of small models of Deathwing command squads, and their main purpose is to protect all of the characters in the list, things like the Ravenwing Talon Masters, to prevent them being shot under any circumstances. The command squads got nerfed a bit in that bodyguard rule update, which means they'd still provide lookout sir to them, but they would be able to be shot if they were the closest. So to make things like Talon Masters work, you'd need to make sure they were advancing behind something like a big unit of Deathwing Terminators who can tank the shots for them and they can still continue to fire. In any case though, this one is a real hero hammer list. We've got Azrael handing out some 4 rerolls to hit, being a fairly decent melee threat, and giving his invul save to near units. Ezekiel again with a bunch of fun psychic powers. There's 2 small Deathwing command squads that could help protect the characters a bit and maybe do some actions. And for a bit of firepower, there's a Relic Contempt Dreadnought with the twin Volkite Culverins. You can't really go too far wrong with that guy. And Dark Angels do have the potential to modify his doctrines a bit to give him more turns of AP-1 shooting. Then for the Ravenwing side, there's Samael, a hard-hitting jet bike force in himself, and then 2 of the Ravenwing Talonmaster Landspeeders with the assault cannons and heavy bolters, one with Rites of War for Obsec, and one with Arbiter's Gaze for better shooting. There's then that Ravenwing Chief Apothecary with Selfless Healer to resurrect slain models, presumably targeting the 3 big units of attack bikes on the list. There's 3 units of 3 of them, all with multi-melters, and they'd be at least reasonably hard to take down behind Azrael's invul save, and with the Apothecary doing his healing tricks. To finish up, there's 2 fast-moving Landspeeder Vengeance. They're the ones that pack the big plasma battery. Overall, it is very character-heavy. It was absolutely great at the time when you could shield them with the command squads and make them near invulnerable to shooting. And to be honest, you probably want a few more battle line units now and less characters. Still though, I think it maybe highlights some of the other powerful units in the Dark Angels lineup. Azrael buffing a Contempt Dreadnought with AP-1 is very nice. Multiple big units of attack bites with multi-melters are solid, and the Talon Masters are still a very annoying shooting threat if you can protect them safely behind other units. So anyway, I hope that gives a few ideas for starting a Dark Angels army in 40k. As always, I look forward to any other tips or ideas from experienced Dark Angels collectors down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, including plenty of regular stuff for the Space Marines. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. If you've found videos like this really useful, any support keeping them coming is massively appreciated. it does take a fair bit of time and effort to produce them. As well as just keeping the videos coming, channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.